Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding Mishnah Berurah Chelik Aleph and we'll be learning today Mirza Hashem, Tav Tzadik Vav Amen Aleph, and Mirza Hashem. With today's share we will conclude Siman Samach Aleph. We pick up on Tzadik Hey Amid Beis, Siman Samach Aleph, Sif Yud Tes. Okay, I almost forgot that. I was going to start from Chav Beis, but we're actually up to Sif Yud Tes. So that's 4 lines off the bottom in the Shulchan Aruch on Tzadik Hey Amid Beis. Says the Mechaber, Tzarech litein revach bein v'chara le'af. We have to put a little bit of a pause between the words v'chara and af. We say in the second parsha of Kriya Shema, the parsha of Ahaya im Shamaya, we say v'chara af Hashem bachem, that the anger or the wrath of the Rabbeinu Shalom will chas v'chalila burn against you. This is because of the previous pasuk. Hishamru lachem, right? Take care, watch yourselves. Pen yiftel avavachem, lest your heart be turned. V'sartem, and you'll turn away. V'avaditem Elohim acherim, and you'll serve other gods. V'hishtakavisam lahem, and bow down to them. If that should happen, chas v'chalila, then v'chara af Hashem bachem, then the anger of Hashem will blaze against you. Says the Mechaber, we need to put a pause between v'chara and af. Why? Because if you read it quickly, you might say v'charaf Hashem bachem. V'charaf Hashem bachem would be Hashem will curse against you. V'charaf. That's not what we're saying. We're saying v'chara af. So we need to put in a little bit of a pause. D'loi l'shtama v'charaf. So it should not chas v'chalila sound like we're saying v'charaf. No Mishnah Berurah, we move on to Sifchaf. Tzarech litein revach, we likewise need to make a little bit of a pause. Bein teva shetchilasa kiseif teva shalafaneha, between a word that starts with the same letter that the previous word ends with. Kigoyin, for example, b'chal levavecha, right? Ve'ahavta eis Hashem Elokecha, you should love Hashem your God, b'chal levavecha, with all your heart. Now, if you don't put a pause between b'chal and levavecha, you may end up reading it like this: b'chal levavecha. How many lameds did I just say? I said one lamed. As a matter of fact, what words did I say? B'cha levavecha. Right? Because if you read it quickly, v'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha b'chal levavecha. B'chal levavecha. That's not the words. The words are b'chal levavecha. And I would take a moment to remind you of what we learned previously. We learned previously that in Kriya Shema, we have a total of 248 words. Remember, we said really it's 245. We add on 3 by listening to the Shleach Tzibur repeat Hashem Elokeichem Emes, or with the 15 vavs in Emes V'Yatziv, but we need 248. Why? Because we need one word of Kriya Shema for each organ and limb in the human body, which is 248. So these words are very, very, very important. We have to say the words correctly. So again, you have a word that begins with the same letter as the letter that the previous word ends with. You got to put a pause between the two words. Again, reading from the beginning of Sifchaf. Tzarech litein revach, you need to place a pause. Bein teva shetchilasa kiseif teva shalafaneha, between a word that begins with the same letter that the previous word ends with, kegoyin b'chal levavecha, or al levavechem. We don't want it to sound like al levavechem. Al levavechem. B'chal levavechem. Esev besadecha. Not esev besadecha. Esev besadecha. Va'avadtem mehera. Hakanof pesil. Eschem me'eretz. Not eschem me'eretz. Eschem me'eretz. So really what you see over here from all these se'ifim, we need to read Kriya Shema with patience. Take your time, read it carefully, and if you need an incentive to do that, just think about, I'm taking time and I'm saying a word carefully. Which organ in my body am I bringing refuah to right now? Right? We said that it sustains each organ of the body. So which one am I helping out right now by taking my time, being patient, and reading carefully? Here we do have a Mishnah Berurah. We have Mishnah Berurah Ois Katan Lamed Gimel. Bechal levavacha. Eina kavanav sheyafsik beinehem. The Mishnah Berurah tells us that when we say that you're making a slight pause, it's not really a pause. We don't want to be mafsik. We don't want to bechal levavacha. Rak sheyikra beinyan sheyishtama shehem shnei lamedin. Just we have to be careful to enunciate it carefully so that we should pick up two lamets. Bechal levavacha. So what the Mishnah Berurah is pointing out is like this. When the Mechaber says tzarich litein revach, that you have to put a space between those two words, the word I used in the English language is pause. But the Chavetz Chaim is saying it's not really a pause. We don't want to say bechal levavacha, because we're not putting a comma between bechal and levavacha. Indeed, the words bechal and levavacha are connected. What does it mean? Bechal levavacha, with your whole heart. It's not bechal with your whole, comma, levavacha. It's bechal levavacha. But you can't read it together, bechal levavacha, because then it would come out wrong. It would come becha levavacha. So you just have to enunciate it very carefully. Bechal levavacha. Can go very fast. Bechal levavacha. But make sure you end off bechal and then say levavacha. Because indeed, really linguistically, there would be what's called a makif between the bechal and the levavacha. You know what a makif is? If you take a look at the Chumash, sometimes you'll see that in a printed Chumash, between two words that are intended to be connected, you see a short dash. That's not a separation. That's to join them. So really there's a makif between bechal and levavacha because those two words have to be joined. And the Mishnah Berurah is going to say now, we could see that they're supposed to be joined by the rules of diktuk, which I'm not going to get into. Because the Mishnah Berurah says now, ki beloy makif, if there was no makif between bechal and levavacha, then tzarich likrois bechoil, bechoilam, uva makif bekamatz. If you notice, the word is bechal, so it's a kametz under the chaf. Bechal levavacha. That's linguistically, grammatically, the reason there's a kamatz under the chaf of bechal is because there's a makif between bechal levavacha that joins the two words together. If not for that makif, if there would be a comma between bechal and levavacha, then there wouldn't be a kamatz under the chaf. There would be a cholam over the chaf. It would be bechoil levavacha. And it's not. It's bechol levavacha. Why? Because there's a makif, because bechol levavacha are joined together. But we have to enunciate it as two separate words. Bechol levavacha. Okay, now we go to Sif Chaf Aleph, where really we continue along the same theme. Tzarich bechol aleph sha'achar mem. Whenever you have a word that starts with an aleph, and that word follows on the heels of a word that ends with a mem. So the first word ends with a mem, the second word starts with an aleph. Says the Mechaber, Tzarich bechal aleph sha'achar mem. Whenever you have a word that starts with an aleph, that comes after a word that ends with a mem, lahafsik beineim, again, you have to make this short little break to make sure to enunciate the two words separately and clearly. Kigoin, for example, v'limadtem oisam. Okay, v'limadtem oisam. What if you don't read it? If you don't read it very carefully, just give me 1 second. Yeah. If you don't read it carefully, you could read it like this: v'limadete moisam. Right? Not v'limaditem oisam, v'limadete moisam. That's what it could sound like. So you took the mem from the end of v'limaditem, you took it off of v'limaditem, and instead you attached it to oisam to make moisam. V'limaditem moisam. No, there's no such word as v'limadete. Moisam is a word. Moisam is their deaths. What does that mean? So you don't want to read it that way. So kigayin v'limaditem oisam, you have to v'limadtem, I guess really it would be. We're going to see that coming up. L'chera, the mem is a tenua kitana. Since the mem is a tenua kitana, I'm talking about the patach under the mem of v'limadtem. So that's a tenua. A mem, a patach is a tenua kitana, so the shva under the dalet, I guess, is a shva noch, not a shva na. So it would be v'limadtem oisam. So you have to read it v'limadtem oisam. Ukeshartem oisam. Not uksharte moisam. Ukeshartem oisam. V'samtem es. Uriisem oisoi. Uzechartem es. Va'asisem es. In all of these cases, if you do not enunciate the two words carefully as two separate words, then the second word is going to be some kind of form of the word mace. It's either going to be moisam, it's going to be mace, it's going to be mess, but it's going to be some construct of the word mace, a corpse, a dead person, right? V'limadete moisam, their deaths. Ukisharte moisam, v'samte mes, uri'ise moisoi, his death. And therefore the Mechaber concludes the Sif, and he says the reason you have to be so careful is shalo yehe nireh kikare moisam, or mace. Says the Mishnah Berurah, he's cut Lamed Daled. He says it's not only by these words. These words are all words where the first word ends in a mem, the second word starts with an aleph, and if you don't read it clearly, you get a construct of the word mace. Says the Mishnah Berurah, you have this in other words in Kriya Shema also, where you're not going to end up with a construct of the word mace, but you're going to still end up with the wrong word. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Eli Rabba Hevi B'Shem Shlah. The Eli Rabba brings down in the name of the Shlah, Dehu Adin B'Chol Aleph Sha'achar Mem Tzarech La'afsik. This pertains to every single place in Kriya Shema where one word ends with a mem and the next one starts with an aleph. Kigoin va'avadtem Elohim acherim. Over there, if you're not careful, you get va'avadte melohim. There's no such word as melohim. You're not going to have a problem that you come up with a construct of the word mace, but still you end up with something that's not valid. It's not a word. Va'avadte melohim, there's no such thing. So you have to read it, va'avadtem Elohim. You have to enunciate it carefully. Einechem asher, zoinim achareihem. It's not zoine machareihem. It's zoinim achareihem. Eloikeichem asher, leloikeichem ani. Eloikeichem emes. Not Eloikeiche memes. Eloikeichem emes. So, again, the Eli Rabba is just bringing down from the Shlah that this is Negeya anywhere in Kriya Shema where one word ends with a mem and the next word starts with an aleph. Gam, additionally, says the Mishnah Berurah, Kol teva shetchilasa aleph, any word with the first letter is an aleph. Ve'efsher shalo yargishena b'mivta, and it's possible that if you read that word together with the previous word, you're not going to enunciate the aleph, tzarech hefsek. You need to make a little bit of a break between the two words. Kigoin, for example, asher anoichi, right? Asher anoichi mitzavecha hayoim. If you read it very quickly, you're going to get like this. Asher Ranoichi. Asher Ranoichi. It's not Asher Anoichi. It's Asher Ranoichi. No, that's not right. So you have to read it carefully. Asher Anoichi Mitzavach Hayom. Make sure you enunciate clearly the word Asher with its resh, and then break Asher Anoichi. Mitar Artzachem. Va'otzar es. It's va'otzar es hashamayim. It's not va'otzar res hashamayim. Asher Hashem, Devarai Ele. Vayomer Hashem El. Daber El. Not Daberel, Daber El. Mitzvahs Hashem. Asher Atem. V'chol ki agavna. Or any such compound of words, any such unit of words. Gam also, kol teva shetchilasa yud. Any place in Kriya Shema where there's a word that starts with a yud. Tzarich lahadgish b'mivta. You need to carefully enunciate the yud. Shalo yera'eh ki'ilu nimsheches achar teva shalafaneha. So that the yud should not get swallowed into the previous word. Kigoyin, for example, Hishameru lachem pen yifteh levavichem. Hishameru lachem, watch yourselves. Pen, lest, yifteh levavichem. Your heart will be turned. Now, it says in Mishnah Berurah, if you do not enunciate clearly pen yifteh, what you can get is this: penifteh, penifteh. Did you hear a yud? There was no yud. Pe nifteh. That's not the words. The words are pen yifteh. So again, you have to enunciate it very clearly. You go pen yifteh or loy yera'eh. Kilu kare pen yifteh. No, I'm sorry. There's no such words in Kriya Shema as lo yera'eh. It's kigoyin pen yifteh, lo yera'eh. It should not appear ki'ilu kare penifteh, as if you're reading penifteh. Oy pen ifteh. V'chein b'tevas yirbu, leman yirbu. It shouldn't come out leman nirbu. It's leman yirbu yamecha. V'chol ki agavna. So you see, Rabbi say, how careful you have to be when you're enunciating all of these words of Kriya Shema. Take it easy. Where are you running? Where are you? You're not running anywhere. I always say, remember, time is the Rabbeinu Shalom's. The Rabbeinu Shalom has plenty of time to give you. The Rabbeinu Shalom also could take away time. So time is the Rabbeinu Shalom's. Spend an extra minute and read the words of Kriya Shema clearly. Enunciate every syllable, separate the words the way they're supposed to be separated, and remember, there's a word for every one of your Ramach Ivarim. Says the Mechaber Vayter, last word of Tzadikei Amid Beis. Af b'psuke de Zimra u'batfilo tzarech ledaktik bekach. Rabbi say this is not only true of Kriya Shema, says the Mechaber, but this is also by Psuke de Zimra and by Shemoneh Esrei. We have to be careful to pronounce the words properly. Haga v'hu adin ha'koirei b'Torah b'Nevi'im u'b'Ksuvim. So too the Baal Koirei who reads from the Sefer Torah or from the Navi or from Ksuvim, yesh li zaher. He has to take care to enunciate all the words clearly. Mishnah Berurah is called Lamed Hey Yesh Li Zaher V'Loi Hishiru Al Kriya Shema, and the only reason the Mechaber goes to great length to discuss this in Hilchos Kriya Shema, Eli Mishum Shemasur LaKol. It's only because by Kriya Shema this is something that everybody says twice a day. V'Yesh Ba Yichud Shemayim, and it has the distinction of being something where we're Mekabel Ol Malchus Shemayim, and we're Miyachid the Rabbeinu Shalom, Hashem Echad, the Miyuchad. We say Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Also, it's a mitzvah say Daraisa. So over here is where the Mechaber goes to great lengths to discuss it. But says the Chavetz Chaim, certainly, and not the Chavetz Chaim, says the Mechaber, certainly we have to be careful by Psuke de Zimra and by Shemoneh Esrei as well. On to Sif Chav Gimel. Chav Gimel is a little bit of a doozy. The Mishnah Berurah is a little bit abbreviated to me, and I found it fascinating that the Dirshu doesn't go a little bit into greater length on this topic. And I have to tell you that if I'm going to go into greater length on this topic, it won't be today because I am not a master of the discipline of Dikduk. But be that as it may, let's take a look at what the Mechaber says and what the Mishnah Berurah says. Tzarech ledaktek, we have to be careful. Shelo yirapeh hachazak, that we should not soften a sound which is supposed to be a strong sound. V'lo yechazek harofeh, nor should we strengthen a sound that is supposed to be a soft sound. V'lo yoniach hanod, we should not make a shva into a shva noch if it is supposed to be a shva nod. V'lo yonid hanach, nor should we make a shva nod out of a shva that is supposed to be a shva noch. What is a shva na? What is a shva nod? What is a shva noch? Noch, a shva noch means a shva that is resting. A shva na or a shva nod is a shva that is traveling. What's a traveling shva and what's a resting shva? Well, first let's start with the shva. What's a shva? A shva are the two vertical dots under a letter. That's the vowelization of a shva, which we say normally makes a sound. So, for example, tenua, the word tenua, which we're going to see soon. Tenua, vayedaber. Let's do basic chumash. Vayedaber. What's under the yud? The yud is a shva. Vaye. That's a shva. Vayedaber. That would be a shva. You could have a shva, which is a shva na. You could have a shva that's a shva noch. Let's take the word mitzvah, right? In the word mitzvah, the way we generally pronounce it, we say mitz. We don't say mitzvah, right? It's not like vayedaber. We don't vayedaber. We don't say mitzvah. We say mitzvah. That's a shva noch. What do I mean that it's resting? It's the end of a syllable. It stops right there. Mitz. That's the end. Mitz. Then we go on to the next syllable. Va. So it's a shva noch. It's a resting shva. Mitz. It rests right over there. That stands in contrast to a shva nod or a shva na. That's a shva that's traveling. That's a shva like the word, if you have a shva in the beginning of a word, Kriyas Shema. Kriyas, ka, is the beginning of a syllable. It's not the end of a syllable. It's the beginning of a syllable so that the shva travels forward. Kriyas Shema. Or Vayedaber. We pronounce the shva under the yud, Vayedaber. It's not Vai Daber. So if it was Vai Daber, right, then it would be a Noch. But it's Vayedaber. So it's a Na. It travels forward. The Mechaber is telling me over here, you have a lot of places in Kriya Shema where you have a Shva. So for example, right away, the first letter of Kriya Shema is a Shva. Shema Yisrael. The shva under the shin of Shema is a shva nod. It's the beginning of a syllable. It travels forward. Shema. Right? So that's a shva na. In the very next word, we have a shva nach. Yisrael. It's not Yisrael. It's Yis. The sin with the shva under the sin is the end of the syllable. Yis. And now we start a new syllable, ra'el, right? Now, that's if you did it that way, if you did it wrong. If you did it wrong, if you made it into a nach, it would be yis. Well, I'm sorry. We do make it is a nach. Yis, ra'el. So it's the end of the syllable. It's a nach. Yis, Ra'el. So Shema is a shvana. Shema. It travels forward. Yis is a noch. Yis, it stops right there. Ra'el. Says the Mechaber, don't mix up your shvanochs and your shvanods. So don't say Shema Yisrael. There is no word as Yisrael. You can't make that shvanoch into a shvanah and make it a shva that goes forward. Make it the beginning of a syllable Yisrael. That would be invalid. That's not the word. You're pronouncing it wrong. That's not the word. The V'ahavta. The V'ahavta, the shva under the vav, that is a shvana. It travels forward. It's the beginning of a syllable. V'ahav. Oh, now we get to the shva under the vase. It's not V'ahavita, right? It's not, that shva is not a shvanod. It's not V'ahavita. It's V'ahav. The vase is the end of the syllable of hav. Ve'ahav. It's a shvanach. Ve'ahavta. So don't read it ve'ahaveta. That would be wrong. Ve'ahavta eis Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavecha. It's not b'chol. It's the beginning of a word. You have to pronounce the shva under that lamed. B'chol levavecha. It's the beginning of a syllable. It's a shvana. Le-va. Oh. But now, what do we do with the next shva? The shva under the vase. Le-vav-cha. That one, technically, you could read it, technically, if you wanted to. You could read it either way you want. It sounds kind of right either way. You could either say, bechal levav-cha, right? You can make it the end of the syllable of the two vases, vav, right? Kamet's vase is va, and then you have next to it the vase with the shva. So you could technically read it levav and make it a shvanach, and then say cha, bechal levav cha. Or you could read it bechal levav-cha. You could make it a shva na. You can make it a traveling shva and make it the beginning of the syllable of vecha. Bechal levavecha. Which one is right? The answer is that is a shvana. It's bechal levavecha. Not bechal levavcha. Bechal levavecha. Why? The answer is because of a rule that we're going to see very shortly in the Mishnah Berurah. And that is a shva that comes after a tenua gedola. What's a tenua gedola? So in the vowels, we have hard vowels and soft vowels. A tenua gedola is a hard vowel. A kamatz is usually considered to be a tenua gedola. The siman for which vowels are tenua gedolas are the words pituche choisam. So choisam, under the suf, there is a kamatz. So usually a kamatz is considered a tenua gedola. A shva that comes after a letter that has a tenua gedola is a shvana. So bechol levavecha. The bechol leva, that kamatz is a tenua gedola. So the vase after it is a shvana. Bechol levavecha. So I'm giving you some of the rules over here, but this is what the Mechaber is telling me. The Mechaber is telling me, make sure don't mix up your shvanaz and your shvanachs. So against that backdrop, let's take a look over here at the Mishnah Berurah Ois Katan Lamed Vav. Hanoch. Don't mix up a shvanach with a shvanad. Shva hanechtefes, a shva that's grabbed. What does it mean that it's grabbed? That means that it's held in place. It's a stop. You grab that shva and you fasten it down. Shva hanechtefes nikreis noch. That's called a shva noch. Kigoin b'soif teva, like a shva that would appear at the end of a word. Oy be'emtza teva, or in middle of a word, haba achar tenua ketana, when it comes after a tenua ketana. Ushva nod, a traveling shva, nikra hamisnayas. That's a shva that travels forward, the beginning of a syllable. Kigon beroish teva, like the shva that appears at the beginning of the word. Shema, ve'ahavta. Or be'emtza teva, or if it appears in the middle of a word, haba achar tenua gedola, if it comes after a tenua gedola. V'siman tenua gedola. What's a tenua gedola? Pituche choisam. A chirik, P, but not always. Usually it's a chirik that has a yud after it. So imagine if you would change this pituche choisam, put a yud between the pei and the tuf. So P, a chirik that's followed by a yud, that's a tenua gedola. P2, a tuf with a vav, an u, that's P2, that is also a tenua gedola. Chei, a tsere, especially with a yud, is a tenua gedola. Chai, a chaylam with a vav, that's a tenua gedola. Sam, a kamatz, is a tenua gedola. So if you have a shva that comes after tenua gedola, then it is a shva nod. Rak achirik kisheyesh yud etzla nikreis tenua gedola, ukishein yud etzla nikreis tenua ketana. Now, again, if we look in Kriya Shema, so ve'ahavta, the shva under the vav, that is a shva na. It's a shva in the beginning of the word. Ve, you pronounce it. It's a shva na. Ahav, what's a hey? A hey, the hey has a patach under it. A patach hey, that's a tenua ketana. So since the hey is a patach, a tenua ketana, so the vase following that hey, that is a shvanoch, not a shvanod. So ve'ahav is a shvanoch, ta. Ve'ahavta, not ve'ahavita. Eis Hashem Elokecha be-chol. The shva under the base, it's the first letter of a word. Be, it's a shvana. Be-chol le shvana, beginning of the word. Le va, that's a kamatz. Okay, a kamatz. So the next vase has a shva. The va is a tenua gedola. So the next vase is a shva nod. Bechol leva vecha. Now, to confuse everything, we come up against a major machlokes. The next word is ve'ahavta eis Hashem Elokecha bechol levavecha u vechol nafshecha. Oh, here we come up with a problem. Is it u vechol or is it uvchol? Is it a shva noch, uv, chol, or is it uve, a shva nod? Here we come up with a major machlokes. Major machlokes. Now, you'll tell me, Rabbi Weiss, what's the room for a major machlokes? We just said here in Ois Katan Lamed Vav that the siman for a tenua gedola is P2 Che Chaisam. So 2, that's a vav with a u. 2, that's a tenua gedola. If it comes after a tenua gedola, it should be a shvana. So it should be uvichal nafshecha. Why would you say it's a machlokes? What's the room to say that it's a shvanach and it's uvchal nafshecha? The answer is that the rule of pituche chaisam, you'll notice that the u is not in the beginning of the word. It's not u pituche chaisam, it's pituche chaisam. That vav with the u is situated in the middle of the word P2, che, chaisam. Over here, u vechal, the vav with the u is the beginning of the word u vechal. So there are those that learn, I think most notably amongst them is the Gra, that when you have a vav with an u in the beginning of the word, followed by a letter with a shva, like u vechal, the vav is a shvanach, not a shvanod. Why? The logic of it is that u is not really supposed to be u. it's really supposed to be a vav with a shva. It really should be v'chal nafshecha. What do I mean? Well, what do the words mean? The words mean ve'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha. You should love Hashem your God b'chal levavecha, with all your heart, u v'chal nafshecha, and that vav is an and. Vav moisef al inyan rishon. That vav, we learned our prefixes in grade school. The vav in the beginning of the word is and. So really that means u v'chal nafshecha, and with your entire nefesh. It's a vav moisef al inyan rishon. It's an and. How do we usually write that? We usually write that with a vav with a shva. Moshe ve'aharon. Moshe and Aaron. It's not Moshe u Aharon. It's Moshe ve'aharon. So why over here is it u v'chal? Why isn't it a vav with a shva? The answer is it can't be a vav with a shva, because then the word would be v'chal nafshecha. And that grammatically doesn't exist. That construct of a word does not exist according to the grammatical rules of Lashon HaKodesh. So even though it's a vav ma'isef al inyan rishon that should be a vav with a shva, that's not the way it's written. It's written as a vav with an u, but it's not a true vav with an u. Therefore, it's not considered a tenuah gedola, and since it's not considered a tenuah gedola, it's uv, not uveh. Again, big machlokes. Problem is that even according to the Gra, there are some words here in Kriya Shema, like ukishartam. I believe he holds that it's ukishartam, not ukshartam. So it's touchy. I don't have it all worked out. I wish I could sit down right now and go through Kriya Shema and tell you halacha l'maisa precisely which ones are na and which ones are nud, but I cannot. So these are the general rules. Maybe I'll look into it. I was surprised that there isn't the Dirshu footnote here. It could be that there isn't the Dirshu footnote here because the truth is this is a very complex and very technical topic, and there's a lot of disagreement over it. What I was makabel from my Rebbe in Kriya, as far as laning, as far as being a Bal Kairei, when I lane the Parsha of Kriya Shema, I make all of them, all of the lemadatem, kishartem, chesavtam, I make them all shva nuz, kishartam, chesavtam, leavdoi, v'chol nafshechem. That's the way I lane them all. That's what I was makabel from my Rebbe as far as being a Bal Kairei. But that's the rule. That's what the Mechaber says. That's what the Mishnah Berurah says. And now we go weiter. Okay, Sif Chav Daled. Tzarich likreis Kriya Shema b'ta'amim. Says the Mechaber, you should read Kriya Shema. You should lane it with the trop. K'may sheheim b'Torah, the way it's read from the Sefer Torah. Hagaz says the Ramah, v'lo nagu came b'Medina Selu. That is not our minig in these regions. However, he says that there are medaktikim that are machmir to taka lane it with the trop. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Eis kan lam zayin kain. We're not noyig that way. Ach shetzarch lizar lifsek b'makam aroy lahafsik lefi ha'inyan. But we do have to make sure to put commas where it's necessary to put a comma so that the words that we're saying make sense. Kedei sheyeh tam v'havana l'dvarav, so that the words that we're saying make sense. Therefore, it's important to learn Kriya Shema slowly. The ilavaki, because if not, the understanding of the words becomes confused. If we read it sloppily without commas in the right places, you know already what I'm going to say. Commas save lives, right? Let's eat grandma. No, it's not let's eat grandma. It's let's eat, comma, grandma. Okay, there are medaktikim that are machmer to lane it with the trop, but don't be a machmer and a medaktik and lane Kriya Shema with the trop, and then don't have kavanah on the words. Because you'll have people who are not used to laning, and paying attention to the trup is going to prevent them from paying attention to the meaning of the words. Sif Chafei. When you say ukeshartam la'isal yodecha, yamashmesh b'tfilin shal yad, you should feel the tfilin shal yad. Ukeshayomar v'hayula taitafa ispein einecha, yamashmesh b'shal roish, you should feel the shal roish. Then you have the minig to touch the shal yad, kiss, touch the shal roish, kiss. Ukeshayomar uri'isam oisai. And in the third parsha of Kriya Shema, in the parsha of Tzitzits, when you say Uri'isem Oisai, and you should see them, Yamashmesh B'shtei Tzitziyot Shalafanav, you should feel the two front tzitzits of the talis. V'ayel Siman Chavdalid Sif Dalid. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Kan Lametes, Kishayamar Kishartem La'ois, V'chein B'parsha Shniya, so too in V'haya Im Shamaya, Kishamaskir Inyan Tfilin, when you mention the Tfilin, Tzarech Lamashmesh, you should feel them again. Sif Chavav, final sif in Siman Samach Aleph. Yesh Hagim, there are those who have the minig, Likrais Kriya Shema B'Kel Ram, to lane Kriya Shema in a loud, raised voice. The Yesh Hagim Likrais B'Lachash, while there are others who are noig to say it quietly. Haga, Umikamakam Yarmer Pasuk Rishain B'Kel Ram, but at least the first pasuk you should recite out loud, the Chen Hagin, and that is our minig, says the Ramah. Says the Mishnah Berurah Cotton Mem. Yesh Hagim. Le'inyanim Yaitze B'Kriya Shema Yedei Sheyechaven Lohitziyoi. Could somebody else be moitzi you in your chiyuv to say Kriya Shema? So somebody will look at you, will say Bereshus. You're going to ask him, be moitzi me with Kriya Shema. You're going to listen. You're going to pay attention to the meaning of the words, but you're not going to say anything. Does that work? Says the Mishnah Berurah. Ayin B'Magen Avramu Prima Gadim. The majority of Achrayim are of the opinion the Yoitze Bazed, that you could be Yoitze that way. Va'odiv Zeme Hirhur. And that is better than if you yourself would look in a sitter and just think the words without verbalizing them. To hearer lav kedibur dami. Because hearer, mere thought, is not considered to be the equal of verbalizing. Masha Enkein Bazeh, but when you listen to somebody else say it, we have a rule of Shemea Ka'oina. The Kosav Eilas Tamid, the Sefer Eilas Tamid writes, V'nira, Tedafka b'mevin haloshain. But it has to be that you understand what's being recited. V'afilu b'loshan ha'kodesh, b'inan dafka sheyaven ha'shemea. Even if the one who's saying Kriya Shema is being moitzi somebody, and he's saying it properly in Loshan ha'kodesh, the one who's listening has to know the meaning of the words. Ayin b'simin kuf tzad gimel sef aleph u'b'shiyari knesses agdola hevi b'shem birkas Avraham tedafka b'yachid ha'moitzi es ha'yachid. This only works one-on-one. Aval yachid ha'moitzi es ha'rabim. But if one person wants to be moitzi ha'rabim, or yachid ha'moitzi es ha'shnayim b'birkas ha'mazayin, or one person is being moitzi two people in benching, afilu einam mevinim b'loshan ha'kodesh yotzim, then it works even if they do not understand what is being said. Okay, that concludes Siman Samach Aleph. Thank you so much for joining me for Liman HaTorah. The source of Liman HaTorah should be Megan against Klal Yisrael. The Rebbe Hashem should send Yeshua's refuahs panasit sheduchim tol those in need. We should be zeichet to see the Bias Kol Tzedek b'mher v'yameinu. Amen. Be well.